Today's episode is a big one. It's about how to deal with those shooting armies. Stay tuned.
Hello there! I like to watch battle reports to get better at games. So I started making short, summarized battle reports that focus on learning points. So welcome to my channel, Newbie Dice. Do like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon if you enjoy my videos.
Do consider speeding up this video with the YouTube settings to consume this content or other YouTube content in a fraction of the time. How to deal with those difficult shooting armies. I'll be uploading this as a YouTube video as well as a podcast format. So if you're watching this on video, you'll be able to see the battle report pictures. If you are following along on audio, I will try to describe those pictures as much as possible so that you are still able to follow along on audio. So I have earlier made also a video about how to deal with flying and alpha strike armies. That's not very suitable for audio because there's a lot of diagrams and explanations. So I'll still link the YouTube video up here if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening in, you can search it out. Kings of War, how to deal with how to deal with flying alpha strike, or Newbie Dice podcast KOW052. All right, that is the episode number. So let's dive into it. So firstly, when you deal with the opponent's army, you first have to assess the enemy's shooting threat. How much shooting does the enemy list have? Okay, so first up is if the opponent has no shooting at all. So I usually ask this question: what are your units that can shoot? Okay, so if they have no shooting, and of course if they have no ability to charge at the top of one, you are able to let your chaff roam free. They are not in fear of being sniped off from a distance. So your chaff can even be deployed in front. You know, most of us, after we play Kings of War for a while, we have learned to deploy our chaff behind so that they remain hidden from shooting. But if the opponent have no shooting, you don't have this worry. So sometimes you would like to deploy your chaff upwards, especially if your chaff units are not very fast. Deploying them upwards will let them get into the prime locations easier. Now, some of them might have a little bit of shooting threat, and that would threaten chaff. So usually they have the ability to deal 2 to 4 damage to defense 3 units. So that would be your lightning bolt 3 to 5 to 8 to even 10. They will deal 2 to 4 damage to defense 3. And that means your 9-11 chaff would be wavered or sometimes dead with some spiked rolls. So in this situation, as well as the next situation, they might deal 5 or more damage to defense 3 units. So usually they would have 15 shots and above. So that would easily help them kill like 11 nerf chaff units. Okay, so in these two situations, you need to think about hiding your chaff. Hiding your chaff pieces would be very important. Not let them get sniped off from a distance before they are given their role, get to do their role of blocking things up. The third level of shooting is when they have the capability to soften hard targets. What do I mean? So they are able to deal 4 to 5 damage to defense 5 units. So instead of defense 3, now you're able to deal 4 to 5 damage to defense 5 units. So that is commonly in like 2 regiments of heart piercers or flame bearers. They have 20 shots. Hitting on 4s, that's 10 hits. Piercing 1, that's 5 wounds. Okay, so 5 wounds alone is not gonna waver your 15-17 nerf unless they spike the nerf roll, right? But over 2 rounds, suppose they shoot you on round 1 and then they shoot you again on round 2, they will be dealing 10 damage, and now you are suddenly in waver or even rout territory. So instead of killing you over 1 round, they would take 2 rounds of shooting to be able to take out a hard target. So of course, if you're talking about Glade Stalkers and Bowls, maybe 2 or more regiments of Glade Stalkers, because they have 2 regiments would have 24 shots. That would be 12 hits and about 4 wounds as well. Okay, and of course they have Elite, so that might be 5 wounds also. Okay, so in this situation, one of the key things is to have healing, because if you are able to heal those damage off, then they can't accumulate damage over 2 rounds to take you out. Another thing is, in lieu of healing, you would want to make sure these targets that they want to shoot at are in cover, because if they are in cover, instead of dealing 5 damage, they will deal about 3 damage. So even over 2 rounds of shooting, there is only 6 damage, not enough to threaten your hard units, and they will probably think of shooting other things. So lastly, the highest level of shooting capability is that they are able to deal within 1 round 10 or more damage to a defense 5 unit. So that would really threaten to take out a unit from range in one round. And of course, you also have to look at whether that capability of ranged attacks, what is the range of it. So they might have a combination of long and short ranged shooting attacks. So short ranged would be like Alchemist's Curse. It is 12 inches plus the wizard's movement speed, right? And of course, trombones or trombone-like weapons like the war engine, the weapons team from Redkin, as well as the Dwarven Flame Belchers. So these are about 12 inch plus the movement of the unit. So if your opponent has such short range shooting, one of the key things to talk about here is to make sure you decide when you want to place your units in range of those short range shootings. So probably not on turn 1 that you would want to be placing yourself in danger of getting shot by these units. Okay. So assess the enemy's shooting capabilities, and I'll talk more in detail later on. But one key thing also, you need to get to understand this from the deployment, from the get-go. Okay, if the opponent has a lot of shooting that can threaten more than 24 inches, that means threaten into your deployment zone, you would probably already want to deploy your units as much as possible within cover. Okay. So I have some image. I have an image over here. This is a battle report, and I actually have a full battle report of this battle in it's KOW048, Green Lady versus Elves. So I'm playing a Green Lady army, and I'm playing against a shooty elf army. So if you like to watch this whole battle report, which also has a lot of insights on combating a shooting army, you can watch it over on YouTube. But this elf army, he has 2 hordes of sea guards and 2 regiments of glade stalkers with 1 elven archmage and 2 bolt throwers. Okay, so one of the key things, firstly, I don't want my Pegasus to be sniped off, my little weak chaff to be shot off very early in the game. So in this map, there is a forest in the middle, so most of my forces are deployed in the middle behind the forest, and in fact my Pegasus is deployed quite far back that it is out of danger from being shot at by the Archmage. Okay, the Archmage moves 6 and shoots 24, that's 30 inches. So as long as I deploy my Pegasus 30 inches away from the Archmage or 6 inch back from the deployment zone, I should be quite safe. Okay, and of course there's the wild card of the Glade Stalkers, because they shoot 24 and they have scouts, so they can shoot even further if you account for their scout movement. But of course, if you have stuff in front that they cannot, if the Glade Stalkers have to overextend themselves to shoot something in the back, and then they put themselves in threat range of the front, of your front units charging them, then that would also make them, deter them from doing that maneuver of scouting and moving close to shoot out your chaff that's hiding behind. So in this example, next to my Pegasus, I have a horde of Forsaken, Order of the Forsaken, which are your Pegasus Knights. That is to deter the Glade Stalkers from coming close enough to shoot the Pegasus. Okay. On top of that, in the middle and front, I have my Earth Elementals. So they are also behind the forest, although the forest is in the middle of the map, so I'm not inside the forest yet. The opponent needs to shoot. Firstly, the opponent needs to shoot from the side, to shoot from the side of the forest into my units. Sometimes they might cop cover, sometimes they don't, but the frontline units are defense 6, so they're not as worried of getting shot at. And then if they shoot at the back units, they will be suffering cover penalties. So it's not a good proposition for the opponent. And notice the numbers are our deployment, how the order of our deployment. And I noticed that the opponent started to deploy most of his shooting on the middle to left side of the map. So my deployment ended up being on the middle and right side of the map. Okay, so firstly, the forest is already providing a line of sight blockage for him to shoot at the things on the right side. And then the middle, the only targets that he can shoot at without cover penalties are the Earth Elementals. So I have 1 unit of Heart Piercers, which are like a soft target, right? They're only defense 3, but they are on the other side of the forest, so he has limited capability to shoot at them. And if you only take a few shots at them, they have regen their wounds back. So it's not a good proposition either. So this is how I handled it from the deployment side. And in fact, on the left side, the only thing that I deploy is one lone unicorn, and it's hiding behind the hill. Okay, so he can't get a shot at the unicorn easily as well because it's hiding out behind the hill, and the unicorn is just there to cause some nuisance. Okay, so general starting points about dealing with shooting armies. Firstly, from the list building stage, you need to have elements to combat shooting already. So some of these elements including having your units, some units or even your entire army be very fast. So that gives them very limited chance to shoot before you crash into their front lines. Okay, to have fast individuals do have that individual rule where normal shooting gets -1 against them. Of course, lightning bolt doesn't have that penalty, but they are able to, move up quickly and then charge into a shooting unit to disable their shooting for 1 round. So that could be a hero that's mounted or a flying hero. Okay, so next is having healing capabilities. So having healing really deters opponents shooting quite a bit. They have to pump enough shots to take out a unit at one go. Okay, and if you are in cover, so it's much harder to do that, right? Because if they suffer penalties, sure, they can deal 10 damage to a unit that is not in cover, but when they're in cover, that changes. All right. So with that healing, that will really help you to mitigate the damage that they cause over rounds. If you don't have healing, they are able to, every single damage that they put sticks, so they can eventually pump in enough range damage, maybe even over 6 rounds to take out your unit. Okay, and following up on that, if your unit has regen, that also helps a lot. Okay, so you might want to have thick chaff. So thick chaff are chaff units that are still relatively cheap, but they have high defense and high nerf. So they have to pump a lot of damage to take out these chaff units that are not that expensive also. So that's also value for you because, they only have a few rounds of shooting before you fully crash into their lines, right? So if your army is mainly high defense, that also helps. So their shooting with no piercing has lower effectiveness. Of course, high volume of shots could still mitigate that problem, but generally having high defense helps. Okay, stealthy also helps, but in terms of stealthy, mainly it would be your Night Stalkers with innate stealth, and of course the Boomer Chariots that gives a stealthy aura. I think there might be another 1 or 2 stealthy auras. I think the Twilight Kin has one. And of course, having lots of nerf would help. So if you have a lot of units that is cheap yet have lots of nerfs, they need to pump a lot of shots into it to take them out. So it might not be an effective use of shots. Okay. So if the opponent, especially if they can shoot into your deployment zone in turn 1, you would want to go first if you win the initiative roll. If not, if they go first, you haven't even moved your army and you're starting to take damage already. So going first would really help, and if hopefully by turn 2 you already start to crash into some of their units if you have a fast army. If not, you have to probably wait till turn 3 before most of the action happens. Okay, so this point I highlighted in red because some people might miss this, although it sounds pretty obvious. Okay, if you have 2 players fighting against each other, the player with the weaker shooting, the list with the weaker shooting must advance. They must come forward because it is in the other player's interest. I have better shooting. It is in my interest to prevent engagement for as long as possible. So in an extreme scenario where both players don't move forward, the player with the better shooting is bound to win, right? Because he will be dealing more damage over the course of the game. So if your list has weaker shooting than your opponent, then you must take the initiative. It is on you to move forward to make contact. And inversely, if you have a better shooting, it is in your interest to delay combat as long as possible. Of course, that is a general guideline. It also differs based on your exact situation. Now, always try to approach screen. That means as you move forward, you are still able to be in cover. Okay, but do not hinder your ability to move forward, to pressure or to charge the next turn. So at the end of the day, you still need to make contact against the opponent to win the game, because if you don't make contact, the shooting army will win. Okay, so you might want to say, okay, I want to move and stay in cover. Oh, I don't want to leave this forest, because if I leave this forest, I would, take the opponent will have no cover penalty. But if staying in the forest means you can't threaten them or you can't charge them next turn, then there's no point staying in the forest as well, because then he's happy to stay back and shoot at you even though you're in the forest, right? So always think, so I will try to move my forces up, with the chaff in front to provide cover penalties for them against your units that's behind, your important units behind. And if I make use of terrain, make sure that if I advance in the terrain, it is still there to, it doesn't slow me down from charging them, doesn't slow down the grand plan of making contact with them. And as you move forward, be careful of the opponent being able to move backwards. So it's out of your charge range or even out of line of sight, and they can continue to shoot you. So one common example is that, let's say you charge 12 inches. So if you're only 10 inches away from, Glade Stalkers, right? They have a speed of 6, so they are able to back up 3 inches. So when they back up 3 inches, now you're 13 inches away and you can't charge them. So when you move forward to threaten them, you do have to take into account at how much they can move back into your calculation. So you need to move forward more so that they can't do the tactic of backing up and continue to shoot at you. Okay, so another one, and this is even more important. If you expose a juicy target for them to shoot at, there's little point in screening the rest. So for example, I have moved all my units up, all my hammer units are in cover except one. So guess what? They're going to shoot that one unit that has no cover. So then if you have moved the rest up in cover and in a way that it slows down the advance, maybe you're limited by the speed of the chaff units that is in front. Okay, or you're walking through a forest, so you can't move at the double. So when you do that, but yet you expose one juicy target, doesn't matter anymore. They're just going to shoot at the juicy target. Put yourself in their position, right? If you are shooting army and you see, I can take out one unit a turn, as long as there's one unit for me to take out, I'm happy. So I'm giving you some examples from here. I use this battle report, which is my Abyss versus my opponent's Night Stalkers list. It's not a very shooty Night Stalkers list per se, but I'm just going to use this to demonstrate a maneuver. And if you'd like to watch this full battle report, I'm linking up at the top right hand corner of the screen right now. So in this maneuver, I moved my horsemen very aggressively upwards and with the gargoyles behind. So that gives me a lot of movement up the field, and hopefully he is not able to get away, or if he gets away, then I get to move forward even more. So this is a very aggressive maneuver to make sure that I contact as soon as possible. Also in this game, he is lightly deployed on the left, so the quicker I eliminate the left side, the better it is for me. If you're from the Asia Pacific region, do consider checking out Hammer House website for your hobby needs. They carry a wide range of miniatures and hobby supplies, including Mantic, Vallejo, Scale 75, and Green Stuff World products. Alright, that was a shout out to my local hobby store, and I totally forgot that I've added that in, so that was a little shout out to them. Okay, so next, this is a battle report that I'd like to cover, and I'm playing a Shooty Goblins list, and this is like my second game playing Goblins, so the list is not very refined as well, and my inexperience also showed through, which makes this one of the prime examples of talking about dealing with shooting armies, because this is Goblins versus Elves. So I'm playing Goblins. My list, I'm just going to read out very quickly. 4 Hordes of Rebel, 2 Hordes of Trolls, 1 Mincer Mob Troop, 2 War Trombones, 2 Mop-Up Launchers, 1 Mincer, 2 Wingits, 1 with shooting bombs away, 1 with ramming speed, which is the combat Wingit, which I never took after this game. Okay, I have Grony Snark with Jarrah's Pendant. Grony Snark is a Goblin King with a flying upgrade. Okay, and Jarrah's Pendant is a Headstrong Aura. So 1 Wizard with a Lightning Bolt and weakness, which I don't take weakness after this game. 3 throw bruises, which are okay, but I didn't take them anymore after this game. And Kuslo and Met 4, which I did not take after this game as well. Okay, 20 units, 14 of them scoring with a total unit strength of 26. I'm combating against an Elves list, which has 3 regiments of Glade Stalkers, 2 troops of Silver Breeze Cavalry, 2 Stormwind Cavalry regiments, 1 upgraded to Quicksilver Lancers with Boots of Striding, and 1 with Wine of Elvenkind, so both of them are nimble. 1 horde of Dracon Riders with Helm of the Drunken Ram, 2 Archmages, 1 with Boots of Levitation and Max Alchemist Curse, 1 with Inspiring Talisman, Bane Chant, and Lightning Bolt 5. 1 with one Lord of Drakon and 1 Dragon Kindred Lord. Total only 12 units with 22 unit strength. So from the get-go on deployment, I have 4 hordes of rebels deployed, right? Now 2 of them, or rather almost 3 of them, are in cover. So 1 is behind a obstacle, 1 is in the middle of some ruins, 1 is behind the hill, and 1 is out in the open. Okay, and then my support staff, my trolls and everything else is deployed behind. Okay, so straight away as I deploy, I realized one thing: I have good shooting, but he has better shooting, and his shooting range largely outthreats mine. Okay, Glade Stalkers 3 units shoot at 24 inches. The Silver Breeze Cav shoot at 18. Lightning Bolt at 24, and only the Alchemist Curse is closer range, but it does have Boots of Levitation, and so he can move 12 and shoot 12. Okay, my only long range shooting would be the Morpap launchers, and they are no piercing, right? So with just them alone, they don't do a lot of damage. I have a Lightning Bolt 3, which is very little, and so trombones are close range. Wingits, they have to fly closer to do the damage. So yeah, not very good close range shooting. Okay, so I'll consider this this goblin list more of a combined arms. So straight away, I realized I need to quickly contact him as soon as possible. Now, I won the deployment. I won the initiative. I chose to go first. And 2 of the rebels just moved as fast as possible up the field. Okay, so the rebel behind the hill went up onto the hill. The rebel in the open went up in the open. Now, the rebel that's behind the obstacle and in the ruins, they have no pathfinder, so they just shuffle up 5 inches. So 2 of my rebels moved up fast, 2 of my rebels moved up slowly. But even if they moved 10, they charge another 10, that's only 20 inches. So my opponent is very happy to stay comfortably in the deployment zone because they won't get charged. And so this is quite a problem. And so with the 2 rebels that moved up quite quickly, guess what? He took out one of them, right? So he took most of his bow shots into the rebel on the hill because the hill is in the center, so you want to take out the center unit first. Okay, and to the point that even the Dragon Kindred Lord could do his fiery breath that's 12 inch onto the rebel because most of my other things are still not in range to deal with the dragon. Okay, and so he dealt 17 damage to the rebel on the hill and took that out. Okay, the other rebel that's in the open is still not in charge range of his units because he just shuffled up or backwards so that nothing is in the charge range. So I'm going to endure another round of shooting. So I was like, oh dear, this is not looking out good for me. So in fact, the rebels on the left, which is behind the obstacle and ruins, they are on the left flank, which I'm poised to win because it's deployed quite lightly on the left side. And now, because of the slow advance, it'll take me a while to win the left, while he can focus his attention on the right. You don't want to only push up half your army for him to shoot at, while the other half is not in threatening him, and he don't have to worry about it till later game. Okay, I'll talk more about that game in the next few slides, but I'm just going to go into some tips while playing the game. So healing helps, that's important. My goblin list has no healing, so every damage that he deals sticks. Or of course, he also has no healing. So now beware of shooting units sniping out your support or chaff pieces that are hiding. So why do I mention this? the moment my middle rebel unit dies, the support units that's behind are very vulnerable and very afraid of being shot out. So even my trombone, I was always very careful to keep my trombone out of 30 inches from the Glade Stalkers, and in fact the wizard as well. So throughout the game, they tend to hang out around here behind the hill in the middle. Okay, so next, well, expect losses while moving up the board. If you're fighting against a dedicated shooting army, they are definitely going to dominate the early half of the game, turn 1, turn 2, or even turn 3. Okay, that's what the army is designed to do, and hopefully even with your losses, you might lose a few units even before contact, but enough of your forces remain to shut down their shooting and to beat his melee force. Okay, so in terms of my opponent, he has Dracon Riders and 2 Quicksilver Lancers in a 2,300 point game, right? Only 3 dedicated hammers. Of course, the dragon also deals quite a bit of damage. So push forward as many things as possible. Don't line up for him to pick them off with shooting one by one. So like myself, half of the army moved up fast and half of the army moved up slow. So he just have to focus his shooting on half of my army. If everything moved up fast, if I maybe decide to deploy everything not in cover and I'm not in difficult terrain and I can push up quickly, then it might be a more different game for the opponent. He will feel more pressured because the left side is pressuring him a bit more. Okay, so the next few points are quite important pointers. So one key thing is don't let the early game demoralize you and affect the late game, which you will be stronger at. So sometimes you lose a hammer unit before you even make contact. You might think, oh my goodness, it's game over. But don't, because you probably have more hammer units than him. So even losing one before contact, you might still have enough forces to bring about the victory, because Glade Stalkers being close to 200 points each, they fare decently well in melee, but not fantastic, right? Not spectacular. Okay, unless you're talking about the Twilight Kin ones. But all in all, Glade Stalkers and shooting units are quite expensive and they take away from the army's melee capabilities. So the next point, sometimes your opponent's dice spike well in the early game, and don't assume that you will lose the game based on average dice results for the rest of the game. I know that when we approach the game, we always think of the battle in terms of average dice results, and sometimes they don't go in your favor, they go in the opponent's favor. This is especially apparent in fighting shooting armies, because the first few turns you're rolling very little dice, but he's doing most of the dice rolling, and once it's spiked well, you lose a unit that you did not expect to lose, and you're like, oh, how I'm not gonna be able to climb back from that, because he's based on the average results, his unit is gonna take, his unit A is gonna take out my unit B, his unit C is gonna take out my unit D, but you are using average dice results to determine the outcome of the game going forwards. When the early game, it wasn't average dice results that landed you in this situation in the first place. Dice spikes up and down, right? So don't assume that it's continued to gonna be rolling well in his favor for the rest of the game. Chances are, more likely than not, at least one of his dice rolls are gonna screw him over, screw up, right? And then that might be the opening you need. Oh, he didn't route this unit and now it's gonna charge and roll over some of his units. So of course he might have hot dice, your opponent might have hot dice that they will roll very well for the rest of the game, but chances are most likely there's some opening for you somewhere down the road. So don't just assume a loss. He wrote well in the start and you're just gonna assume average results for the rest of the game based on you having lost units already. Okay, and focus on scenario, and especially if you're fighting against a list with war engines has no value for scenario. They're worth nothing at the end of the game. Okay, if I bring 400 points worth of war engines, they would have to kill off 400 points worth of units to break even. Okay, because I kill off 400 points of your unit that don't score. Well, guess what? My 400 points of war engine don't score either. So I have to deal more than 400 points worth of units to kill 400 points worth of units to break even, or to get a gain on my return on investment, right? So continuing on to this game of the goblins versus the elves. So note that turn 1, he stayed back well within his deployment zone. Now the scenario is invade, and this is the center line over here. So at this point, my right side, that 2 rebels have moved forward, 1 has died, and then I have 1 lone rebel, of course with a troll horde hiding behind it. But it's like, I'm not going to, with just 1 rebel horde moving forward, he's just going to shoot it all down. So I stayed back, mostly because the dragons are also threatening the trolls behind, so I have to stay back. So I decided, okay, let's see if I can hold out the right side as long as possible while my left side comes forward. They're still trundling along because they're going through difficult terrain, right? Okay, and my support pieces, the 2 trombones and the wizards in the middle of the map, have to hide pretty far back behind the hill because I want to stay out of 30 inches from the glade stalkers. So as the game went along, you might think that the game is very badly in my favor, right? Okay, this troll went forward because he has nowhere to hide, so I decided might as well go forwards. Okay, so at the bottom of 2, he's still firmly in his half of the deployment zone, other than, or his half of the map, other than one of the Stormwind cavalry coming forward. And with that, the Drakon also jumped over a building to land at the back of my deployment zone, but also he's not facing any enemy, so he'll take him another turn of repositioning to threaten my units. Okay, so with that, my Kuslo decided to play a little bit of hide and seek, try to deter this Stormwind cavalry. Okay, so the left side as quickly as possible, try to push upwards. Okay, and top of 3, my 2 rebels on the left that has trundled through terrain has finally made it across to past the halfway point in invade. Okay, and it is threatening that 1 lone Quicksilver Lancers over there, and of course he doesn't want to charge in because he's gonna get eaten by mincers. Okay, so over on the right side, he shot and wavered the rebel horde this time, the other lone rebel horde. Okay, but still the 3 glade stalkers are still quite close to that deployment zone. Okay. The next round, they shot and killed off the rebel and put in some damage from spare shots into the troll. Okay, some shots over here went into a winged that wavered it. Okay, and so you see the Stormwind cavalry started to turn around. And one thing that he did was he exposed his glade stalkers within 12 inch of the troll. So I took that charge. With a bit of lucky dice rolling, I managed to kill off that glade stalker unit. Okay, so I pushed quite aggressively into his deployment zone, his half of the table, and most of the action is happening on his half of the table. His Quicksilver Lancers on the left does a lot of line of sight maneuvering, backing out of the forest to prevent my rebel from charging him. So my rebel continued to move forwards, this time into the forest on his half of the map. These trolls stayed back because it's within charge range of the dragon. I just have a little bit of the ruins sticking out so that he'll clip hindered charge. Okay, so although it looked very bad for me, the game was actually not too bad. So once again, over on the left side, the Quicksilver Lancers moved out of charge range or line of sight. Dragon is coming in to threaten the mincers and the troll and the trolls and the mincer troop here. And my right side is starting to go down. My trolls that killed his glade stalkers got charged in the rear by the Stormwind cavalry. And so on his right side, he has 2 glade stalker units left and a Stormwind cavalry. He has 1 Drakon horde in the middle and 1 dragon in the middle. And the Quicksilver Lancers are still firmly within his deployment zone doing maneuvering shenanigans. And 1 Silver Breeze cavalry, which I might still have enough shooting to take out. Okay. So here, the Lancers keep dancing out of line of sight. So I brace myself for the Dragon and Drakon charge. Okay, and of course one of it will not get charged. This one is still facing off against the Lancers. Okay, and over here on the left, or the right rather, I use one Troll Hero and KOW053 to charge into one unit of Glade Stalkers. Didn't do much damage, but because the other Glade Stalker is kind of parked behind, so they're kind of stuck having to deal with these two units. And take note, it's already the top of 5 right now. So I'm not sure if they double charged, but they killed off, I think they double charged and killed off KOW053. So I'm left with one Troll Hero on the right side. And because of the way they were deployed, I could charge one Troll Hero in and block both of them. And to be able to do so, I need to charge into this unit on the right side. Okay, so the left unit can't move past the center line, and it's going into turn 6 pretty soon. And so on the top of 6, let's see over here. Let's see what happened here first. So they charged this Troll Bruiser. The opponent charged the Troll Bruiser. Stormwind Cavalry came past the center line. Okay, so over here, top of 6, my Troll charged and blocked up the 2 Glade Stalker units because they've been shooting from their deployment zone the whole game. Now they are not able to cross the center line if the game ends at 6. So that's 6 unit strength that didn't score for the game. Okay, over on the right side, Lancers crashed into... I charged into the Rebel. My Rebel charged into the Lancers rather. So dealing a bit of damage, taking off their Thunderers. Okay. Dragon charged into the Trolls. And I charged him back, dealing some damage. And guess what? I wavered this Quicksilver Lancers. And Mincer charged and killed the Silver Breeze. But this is an Alchemist Curse Archmage that can still do a lot of damage. So Trolls got taken out, but it's okay. The Trolls are in my half of the map anyway. So at the bottom of 6, I have 6 unit strength across 2 units of Rebel. Versus for him, he's only at 3, 6, 7, 8. And this Dracon Rider over here who has been charging and killing my Trombones and Mop-Up Launchers, which I'm fine with because that is one unit strength that is across and I can't really stop already. And of course I did use my Trombones to try to do damage to it, but didn't roll well enough to put it in wave or route territory. So I allow him to kill off my Mop-Up Launchers, and I'm not too fast about it because these things don't score at the end of the game anyway. So if the game ended on 6, it still wasn't such a bad defeat for me because I would have 6 unit strength against 8. Okay, continue on to turn 7, so I tried to make the best of the situation. So I positioned in a way that, I charged the dragon, didn't take it out, dealt a fair amount of damage. And the Dracon Riders, if they were to charge, would be in my flank, and that would bring it into back in their half of the board, and so they wouldn't score. Of course, after defeating my Rebel, they could possibly sidestep across to the other side of the back to the other half for invade. In fact, he can do a maneuver by using the Archmage to block the landing of the Dracon so that when he charges, it's not centered on the Rebel but closer towards the end zone for him. Okay, so if he put his Archmage somewhere here, let me draw it out on the screen. Of course, you don't have to know this fully if you're just listening in. The dragon will counter charge and will be here. And then the Dracon will be something like this. And then you'll still be in its half zone. So I'll try to make the best of the situation. But of course, that still didn't happen. Okay. And guess what? I shot and wavered the the Stormwind Cavalry. And then it died to a charge from the Mincer. Okay, so 6 damage and I rolled well. And so I took off 3 unit strength from here. In fact, I wavered this Glade Stalker, so it's not going to get across to score unit strength. Of course, this one can still come forward. So he still has 3 from here. 3 from the Dracons. 1, so he's still on 8. And I'm still on 6. And of course, on his turn, he could charge and kill off this Rebel. But then he might roll double ones, right? So there's a risk there. But of course, if he does put that Archmage here so that he's Dragon charge in the flank, but still within the past center line, he would still be able to score. So it's a lower risk charge in that sense. Okay, we did not play out the bottom of 7 because I've lost the game anyway. But yeah, focus on the scenario. Even though it looks like I'm getting my my butt whooped, I was still pretty much in the game till the end. So some late game points to take note of. So you can still lose on attrition and still win the scenario. So try your best to push the scenario without overextending. When the shooting armies stay back to shoot, they need to claw back on scenario in the late game. So I'm talking about the Glade Stalkers who have stayed pretty much somewhere in their deployment zone the whole game. They have to claw their way back to past the center line. In fact, if it ended on 6, none of the Glade Stalkers crossed the center line. And it ended on 7 and only one got through because the other one got wavered. Okay, so I'm going to show you another example where I fought against an army that won on scenario even though it lost on attrition. So this is my other goblin list that is more refined. It's a 2000 point list. 4 hordes of rebels, 1 horde of crows, 2 trombones, 2 more pop launchers, 1 sharp stick thrower. In the 2300 point version, there will be 2 sharp stick throwers and 2 trolls. And 2 mincers, 2 wingeds shooting versions, the bombs away. King, that's a Grony Snark with Headstrong Aura. 2 wizards. Okay, in my 2300 point list, I have 3 wizards, but here I have 2. All of them come with the default Lightning Bolt. Okay, one of them, I gave them an extra spellcaster level to get Alchemist Curse 2, and the other one has Boomstick for Lightning Bolt 5. Then I have Magua and Juice, and a King on Chariot. For my opponent, he's playing a Salamander's list, 2000 points, a Ceremonial Guard Horde with Fury, 2 hordes of Tyrants with the Effigy of Fire, 2 regiment of Scorch Wings, and 1 horde of Rhinosaur Cavalry with Boots of Striding, 1 Lachilidon, 1 Battle Captain on Rhinosaur with Inspiring Talisman, a Gekota Skylord on Scorch Wing, and the formation. The formation is 2 Prime Regiments. They get Stealthy and Scout, and 1 Salamander Hero. I forgot what he's called. I think he's a Battle Captain, and he gets an Aura Elite for the whole formation, as well as a Pathfinder Aura for Heavy Infantry, and it itself gets Scout and Stealthy as well. Total of only 12 units, but 11 of them score and 26 unit strength. The scenario is loot, and I would say my goblin list is not very effective into loot, because the thing about loot is the tokens are on the center line. An opponent can pick up the token from just out of 12 inches of you. So you need something that charges 13 inches, that is strong, that deters people from picking up the token first turn. But I have nothing that is quite strong that can charge more than 12 inches. My hardest hammer are the trolls, and they only charge 12 inches. So that makes the scenario difficult for me, and especially when I lost the first turn roll. So my opponent went first. But before that, if you look at screen, or if you're listening in, loot is 3 tokens. We space them quite evenly, 1 in the middle and 1 on each side. Okay, my opponent deployed 1 Prime Regiment on each of the 2 sides, and they have scouted out to poised to pick up the token if they go first. Okay, Ceremonial Guard in the center as usual. Okay, 1 Tyrant Horde on each side, and a Rhinosaur Cav on the right extreme flank. Okay, for myself, there is a little hut that is a blocking terrain that's close to my deployment zone, which splits my deployment to the left 2 turrets and the right 1 turret. Okay, so the left 2 turrets has 3 rebels deployed there, trombones in the center, 2 mincers around the center as well, 1 winged on each side, more pop launchers near the center, and the other right side has 1 rebel horde, King on Chariot, trolls, and the sharpstick thrower. Okay, I did position my fast staff to threaten the tokens, but they just don't have enough attacks to deter him. So I've Grony Snark on 1 looking at the left and middle token because he charges 10. Magua and Juice does charge quite far because it's 12 and wild charge D3 is looking down at the center token, while on my right side I have the King on Chariot that's speed 9. Okay, None of this would deter the primes though. So he won the first turn, and expectedly the 2 primes went up to pick up the tokens. And the middle has a ceremonial guard horde. The ceremonial guard horde shuffled forward, not enough to pick up the token, but I'm not going to challenge it because only the rebels are in charge range and it's not going to deal significant damage to the ceremonial guard. And if I commit now, my rebel will die too early to tyrants. So immediately from the get-go, he applied a lot of pressure by picking up the 2 of the 3 loot tokens and heavily contesting the second one, which I will not be able to pick up. So I'm on the back foot here trying to win back the tokens for the rest of the game. And what's more, the primes have stealthy, which is useful against me. Of course, I do have some things that don't that ignore stealthy, and one of it is Alchemist Curse, Lightning Bolt. Okay, so for my shooting, I shot at the Scorch Wings. So the Scorch Wings are like maneuverable and what do you call it? Versatile chaff, right? You can fly around and shoot. They can sometimes charge. But my opponent decided to park it behind his ceremonial guard and behind his forces. But they are height 4. I can see them. Cover penalty, but the Morpap launchers ignore that. So I shot some shots into the Scorch Wings, including probably some bow fire from Groany Snark and Lightning Bolt from Wizard over here. And I wavered it after dealing 4 damage to it. That means a 7 to waver. Okay, on the right side, I was a little bit lucky. I shot some shots in, dealt 5 damage to the primes that's holding the token, right? And then I rolled at least a 9 to waver it. Okay, now, one of the key factors, I did shoot Lightning Bolt, which has no cover, and I shot Alchemist Curse, which has no cover. So Alchemist Curse has a threat range of 12 plus 5 for my wizard, and in order for him to pick up the token, he would be at least 13 inches from me, so I can easily get in range to Alchemist Curse. Okay, Stick Thrower as well. This loot token is out in the open, so he was only benefiting from stealthy and not cover. Alright, the King of Chariot can shoot as well. So on his turn, the wavered primes on the right just reformed to face the charge because the King was looking at his flank by moving to the side over here. The Rhinosaur came up to threaten. Okay, the Ceremonial Guard in the middle picked up the token. So it's just a lot of shuffling going on here. Shuffling the Tyrants forward as well. Okay, so these Tyrants here on the left are threatening both of the Rebel Horde, which is a little bit nerve-wracking for me, because together with the Skylord, he can quite easily kill these units. Okay, so what I wanted to do was to charge, to send something on the Ceremonial Guard so that I can move my trombones forward. These 2 are meant to be trombones, and to get in range to blast it the following turn. Okay, so out of these 2 rebels that's in threat range of the Tyrants, I decided to charge out the one that's in the forest. Okay, because if the Tyrants were to charge at the one on the extreme left, then it will be a little bit out of position. Okay, if it reform, it can't see past the forest, and then it will take many turns to get back in the game, these Tyrants. So that's why I decided to charge out this horde of rebel in the forest. Okay, so I wing it, dealt some damage to the Tyrants over here. So Rebel went in, dealt 2 damage, surprisingly. Okay, over, and I shuffled the center block forward with 1 Rebel, screening 2 Mincers and 2 Trombones. Okay, the wavered Scorch Wings, I took them out with continued fire. And over on the right side, my continued fire killed the primes. And the Rhinosaur that came up to the Rhinosaur cavalry horde that came up to threaten, I charged it with the King on Chariot. Okay, dealt 3 damage, which was quite respectable, and positioned my trolls to charge next turn. Okay, so how did my opponent respond? So my opponent has this mission of, just grab the token and throw everything else at me, and that's how he played. Okay, so let's rewind 1 step. I did charge Groany Snark into these Tyrants because I'm hoping that if these Tyrants can't charge this Rebel Horde, then this Horde of Rebel have a good chance of surviving. One thing that I miscalculated was that these Tyrants are actually, the other Tyrants on the left was actually within charge range of the Horde Rebel. Okay, so this would have been a brilliant maneuver if these Tyrants weren't in charge range. Okay, and these Tyrants Over here on the right, my Grony charged it and dealt 0 damage, so it was a total waste. He has no healing, so if I have dealt any damage, right, it would at least stick and help me in the later game. Okay, so in his response, so the Tyrants on the left charged the Rebel in the middle, okay, and then faced the other Rebel in the middle. Okay, Gekota Skylord did a sneaky maneuver flying around and hiding out in the forest facing the flank of my center force. Okay, and over on the right side, so the primes died, but because you die to shooting, you just drop your token. He used his battle captain on Rhinosaur to pick it up. Okay, the Tyrants killed Grony easily. Okay, and what happened here is that the the Scorch Wings flew up to, I'm not sure why he didn't charge, maybe but the Scorch Wings flew up to block up the Rebel horde. The Rhinosaur Cav killed the king. Okay, so in this primes on the left that took the token since turn 1, they have been backing up to 2.5 inches every turn. Okay, Ceremonial Guard securely with the token in the middle. Alright, so this is where I threw a lot of things into the Tyrants. Now these Tyrants took 3 damage from the Winged. Okay, the Tyrants on the left, that is. Okay, so my center Mincers, 2 Mincers charge at the Tyrants. The Rebel that's hanging out on the extreme left could still see and charge into the Tyrants in the flank, but it's hindered from the forest. Okay, so now nonetheless, I think I had a good chance of routing this unit, but I just failed to hit. They had a total of 12 damage, so I think with Brutal, that's 13. I just needed a 4 twice to route, and I rolled a 3. So that's sad times. The Gekota that flew into the forest, I turned all my shooting units at it and surprisingly dealt quite a bit. Okay, so the Winged plus 2 trombones, lightning bolt, maybe a mop-up, probably not a mop-up. So what I did with my mop-up was I loaded up. So my center Rebel charged at the Ceremonial Guard. It took 2 from the first Rebel. The second Rebel dealt 6 more, and part of it was due to mop-ups being launched into the Rebel horde. Okay, another little bit of shooting went into the Kilidon, who has just been moving around, hiding out behind the entire game. It came up to shoot at the trombone, but thankfully only dealt 1 damage and did not waver it. And so I shot it in return and I wavered it. I think lightning bolt went into it, as well as maybe 1 pup, because I think I rode pretty well against the Lichelidon, the 2 trombones. You know, with 20 dice, sometimes you do spike well, right? So that's 1. Over on the right side, I charged the Scorch Wings and failed to route it. I think I loaded it with pups as well, but only dealt 4 damage, failed to waver it. And over on the extreme right, the Trolls charged the Rhinosaur unhindered, and Margot and Juice was also in range. Margot and Juice has quite a fierce melee profile as well. 7 attacks on 3+, crushing 2 with Vicious. Now he is hindered by the leg that he started in, so 7 attacks hitting on 4s, crushing 2 with Vicious, probably 2 or 3 wounds, but alas, I failed to route the Rhinosaur Cavalry Horde, and that was quite clutch. Okay, over in the center right, where he had another Tyrant Horde that just killed my Grony, I just threw 1 Winged into it and dealt 1 damage with his 1 attack. Yeah, just to hold it from charging for another turn. Okay, so top of 4. Now that I failed to kill 2 of his hammers, the Tyrant Horde killed 1 Mincer in return. The Ceremonial Guard countercharged the Rebel. Now without any support, it just dealt 9 damage and did not kill or waver it. Okay, the Tyrants that got chaffed up by the Winged killed the Winged. Okay, Scorch Wings dealt a little bit of damage back on the Rebel. And what happened was the Rhinosaur Cavalry Horde killed Magua and Juice, and it could actually overrun because Magua and Juice is actually an individual on the 50 mil base, and it dealt 8 wounds to the Trolls. Thankfully did not waver or route it. Okay, So what's key here though is the left side, the center ceremonial guard is pretty much stuck in combat, right? Because of my rebels charging it repeatedly. The left side primes that's still alive with the left token has been backing up and is now in difficult terrain, so difficult for me to shoot it down. And the Rhinosaur captain on the right side has turned 180 degrees around and is gonna start moving backwards 10 inches next turn, which will be very difficult for me to take back because my list is usually speed 5 and 6. It's very hard for me to snatch that token back. And that is the cost because I failed to kill the Rhinosaur over here. Okay, so that spells trouble for me. Okay, so bottom of 4, I double charged the Tyrants on the left and killed it again, expectedly. Okay, the MacLeod who got wavered the turn before is now dead. Okay, the Rebel Horde charged the Ceremonial Guard again, which this time dealt 0 damage. The other Rebel against the Scorched Wings killed it. I think I loaded it up with pups just to make sure I killed it. The Trolls counter-charging the Rhinosaur Cav with 10 wounds, now up to 16, and killed it. And I pumped some shots, some into the MacLeod to kill it and some into the last remaining Tyrant Horde. Okay. So as expected, the primes on the left continue to back up. The Ceremonial Guard second charge killed the Rebel in the center. And the Tyrants the Tyrants assisted to kill the Rebel in the center. And the Rhinosaur on Captain expectedly moved about 10 inches back. So it's now very far away from my right forces of 1 Rebel and 1 Horde of Trolls. The Trolls that killed the Rhinosaur Cav is poised to move at the double 12 inches next round. There is a forest in the way, so I position in a way that you'll not clip the forest. So the primes, to stop it from moving back even further, this is already bottom of 5. I charged it with a Rebel Horde, hindered because it is sitting in a field. Okay, and the center Ceremonial Guard got killed with shooting, while the right, the last remaining Tyrants got killed by the Rebel Horde, probably with loaded more pups as well. Okay, yep. And the Tyrants moved at the double to not the full 12, I think, because if I move the full 12, he could easily dodge out of my line of sight, because I have to double at an angle to dodge the forest, right? So top of 6, this is how it's looking. I killed the Ceremonial Guard with shooting, so he had to drop the token, and he put his Battle Captain, who is an individual, on top of that token. So the rule is, if there's an individual on it, he kind of guards it. So he can't pick up the token, but I can't either until he's dead, and he's out of charge range of my Rebel Horde in the center that just killed the Tyrants. Okay, the Battle Captain made a turn. Now it's out of the Trolls' line of sight. So at the bottom of 6, if it was ended at the bottom of 6, the score would be 2-0, right? My Rebel, so there's an eternal struggle between my Rebel Horde on his primes. And in fact, he countercharged it. I think for the sake of trying to keep the primes alive, he could have just backed up so that I could cop another hindered charge. But he charged in return on the left. Then I killed the Battle Captain with shooting, quite surprisingly, because he is stealthy and individual. Okay, so I did roll a few 6s, so I thankfully took it out. Okay, the Rebel Horde doubled forwards as much as it could. I'm not the full 10 because of the maneuvering of the trombones. I needed to get clear shots at the battle cap. So my Rebel moved maybe about 8 inches forwards. Okay, so now it's just within 10 inches of the other primes in the flank. Okay, the Trolls turn and move 90, to keep the Battle Captain in the center of its field of vision. So even if he moved 10 inches forward, because it's at the diagonal angle, it's not completely away, it would still be within charge range of the Trolls. So, and I rolled a turn 7. So what he did on the left side, he backed up the primes, and then he faced the battle captain on Rhinosaur to face the trolls charge. Now the trolls are in the forest, so it'll be a hindered charge. Over here, I guess I could have went for a draw if I tried to shoot the primes down, because now they are only in stealth, they're not in cover. But I decided to try to go for the win. So now it's out of charge range of this rebel. So my rebel moved up to pick up the token. I just charged back in with one rebel and one shooting winged in the side. So it's a 2 attacks that hit on 5s with no crushing. I loaded up with more pups. 8 damage, but failed to route it. Picked up the token in the center. The right side, the trolls charged into the battle captain and failed to route it as well. In fact, I rolled so poorly. 0 damage. So now if you look at this, at the bottom of 7, he is left with exactly 2 units with 2 tokens. I have so much more forces left, but I lost the game. So he lost the attrition, but he won the scenario. So that is a prime example of how you can lose on attrition but win on scenario. So his battle goal from probably very early on was to just throw everything else at me and keep the tokens as safe as possible. And that's exactly the game plan, how he executed and how he won. So the primes are probably about 120 to 40 points. The captain on Rhinosaur, I think it's 170 with the Inspiring Talisman. So all in all, about 300 points worth on his side. My 2 rebels are already 250. The trolls 190. So that's over 400. The winged 500. This is 2 added together, about 600. That's about 700. About 800 over to 1,000 points left of my army versus his 300. Okay. So yeah, prime example of how to deal with shooting armies. Concentrate on the scenario. All right. Closing thoughts. Veil of Shadows is not a very good solution to the shooting problem. Okay, these are some of the reasons why. Okay, firstly, you need to take it on a caster. So if you usually don't take a caster in your list, now you are needing to spend 1 slot on a hero caster. Okay, and if you take a caster, usually you want them to cast other spells, Bane Chant, Lightning Bolt, or whatnot. And if you're casting, well, of course, first turn, you're probably not casting Bane Chant, you're probably casting Lightning Bolt. Okay, and if you're doing Veil of Shadows, you're not doing Lightning Bolt, right? So you're paying what I call a spell tax. When you pay, when your caster have more than 1 spell, but he can only cast 1 spell a turn. Okay, and next thing is it might fail, right? You roll 2 dice, you roll 3 dice, sometimes it fails, then it's totally wasted. Okay, and secondly, you need to turn it on. So if the opponent goes first, top of 1, you haven't casted the Veil of Shadows yet. So you lose 50% of the effectiveness, because the first 2 turns are the most critical turns that you need to get Veil of Shadows off. And if you fail to cast it, you lose 50% of the effectiveness. If you don't go first, you also lose 50% of the effectiveness. And lastly, even though you do all of that, you cast is a 6-inch aura of stealth, the opponent can just shoot at other things that's not in the stealth bubble. They usually have plenty of other juicy targets to shoot at. Now, the only exception to these are short range shooting, because maybe they're only in range to walk up and shoot at whatever's in front of them, and if they're in stealth, like whatever's in front of the trombone, okay, they don't have much other shooting targets. But if you're talking about Glade Stalkers or Lightning Bolts, or even 18-inch shooting, they can easily just choose to shoot at something else outside the bubble. Another thing would be War Engines, because they are facing down a certain direction, they can't turn to face something else. So if other things are out of line of sight and the only things that are in line of sight, they are in the stealth bubble, then that will be a great situation for Veil of Shadows. But otherwise, generally, it's not a great solution. Okay, so at the end of the day, remember to pressure and advance with scenario. Okay, pressure with the advance and pressure on the scenario. Okay, so while of course minimizing your losses as you move up the board, move sensibly. Okay, you need to have a balance of keeping your forces safe while moving forwards as much as possible to threaten them, pressure them. So post multiple threats as soon as possible. Multiple things can come crashing in, so they don't have enough shots to deal with everything all at once. Okay, once you line up, certain things hold back, certain things go forward. That's their favorite time where they can just mount up or shoot out whatever's coming forward while they can ignore whatever's staying back. Okay, so with that, I would like to give a quick shout out to my patrons. 1 peep, we have Anonymous, 2 peep patron, Luke Schaefer, and a 3 peep patron, Guy Harper. Thank you so much for your support. It really helps keep me going. So do remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for this YouTube video. If you're listening to it on podcast, do leave a review. And of course, do comment on the video as well. Whether you find these tips helpful. Do you find that there are other tips that I did not cover in this video? Do add that into the comments, because I'm sure people who are watching the video, they would be keen to hear what other tips there are out there. Okay, so I'm now on YouTube and podcast format, and I have a Patreon. So if you'll be so kind, if you like what I've been doing for the Kings of War community and scene, do give me some support, show some support for me on Patreon, and I would really appreciate it, because making these videos do take a lot of time. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video of how to deal with shooting. And if you've been listening to it on podcast, hope that I've given enough description for you to be able to follow along. And of course, there's a lot of tips that's spoken verbally as well. With that, I'll see you in the next video.